Hello, welcome or welcome back. My name is Ari, and today we're in front of my computer because we're doing stats. Nothing but stats today. I hope you like numbers. So, for the entire year of 2020, I read 267 books. I would have liked to read 100,000 pages, but I fell a little bit short and I ended up reading 97,507 pages. Hopefully for 2021 I can hit that 100,000 pages goal. Whatever. Average pages per book. Per book I read on average 362 pages, which is a very decent sized book per page. Per day, I read an average of 266 pages per day. That's a lot of pages per day. Honestly, that's a lot of pages to read per day. I obviously didn't actually read 266 pages per day. It would be like days off. I would read like 700-800 pages, and then normal days I'd read like 100 pages. All right, star ratings is next. I had 22 5-star rated books, which is fantastic. Now this did include a lot of rereads. I think I ended up with like 13 or 14 like new to me 5 stars. Still fantastic. Yay. 4 stars, I had 72 4-star ratings, which is good. The 3 stars, 143 3 stars, which that makes sense. 3 stars are usually books that are not like really amazing, but they're also not like really bad. They're kind of ranges of meh. Some of them are like good meh, some of them are like bad meh, but they're books that I'm not really going to remember within like a month or 2 months or the next year. They didn't stand out to me in any way, but I didn't love them and I didn't hate them. So having a lot of 3 stars makes a whole lot of sense. 2 stars, 24 2 stars. I'm okay with that. And I had 6 1 stars. But at least I had far more 5 stars than I had 1 stars. You will see all of the 1 star and 5 stars in their own separate best of and worst of video, like books of the year videos. My average book rating for 2020 is 3.3 stars, which I'm very comfortable with. I'm gonna read books that I really don't like. I'm gonna read books that I really do like. If I have like a 4-star rating or above, or if I have anything but a 3-star, it's either it's too high, which means I'm not looking outside of my own comfort level, or books that like my comfort zone books, which I want to look outside of what I know I'm going to love. I want to find new favorite genres, new favorite tropes, but if it's lower than 3 stars average, that means that I am only reading books that I don't like and I'm not taking time for myself to read books that I love. So a 3.3, good, happy, whatever. A few other like weird stats. I read the most books in the month of September. I read 32 books in September, and I read the least books in the month of April, where I read 16 books in April. April, I did kind of like burn out on reading and didn't read anything from like the 15th through like the 29th of April. I just needed a break from reading. I took that break. I still managed to get a whole lot of books that month. The most pages, not the most books, but the most pages was November, where I read 11,882 pages. This makes sense because I was doing the Goodreads Fantasy Challenge that month, which was trying to read 20 books that were nominated for Goodreads Fantasy, as well as like rereading my old favorites for the Century Challenge that I did. So I had to read a lot of books that month, and I was reading fantasy, which tends to be like thicker, chunkier books in there. I also read 2 Stormlight Archives books that month, so those are both over 1,200 pages, so it makes a whole lot of sense that that month would have been a high page number book. The lowest pages was again April, where I read 4,860 pages that month. And now, pie charts. What genres did I read this year? My biggest genre was fantasy, where 28.8% of the books that I read were fantasy books. This makes a whole lot of sense for me because my favorite genre is fantasy. But the fact that only just under 30% of the books that I read were fantasy means that I am doing a fairly decent job of exploring outside of my own interests. The next biggest category, I think this has a lot to do with my century challenge. Normally my second biggest category would have been science fiction, but this year it was just general fiction, where this is like, it doesn't really have a category, maybe contemporary fiction, historical fiction, all that kind of stuff. I just shoved in the fiction category, and that was 21.7% of my reads were just general fiction. The next category is sci-fi, where 15.4% of my reads is sci-fi. For 2021, sci-fi will probably be above fiction, but maybe not. I'm reading a whole lot of books for Goodreads challenge, so maybe that fiction will stay really high up there. Next highest category was horror, which I'm surprised at. I don't really feel like I read a lot of horror, though I guess I did do like a couple of challenges where I focused on horror books. And that was 9.4% of my reads. After that was nonfiction, which was 7.9%. I set a goal this year to read 12 nonfiction books, thinking that I didn't really read that much nonfiction in 2020, but I read 21 nonfiction books in 2020. So obviously I read a lot more nonfiction than I think I do in my head. So I should definitely very, very easily be able to hit my goal of 12 nonfiction books, because apparently I was already doing it, or well above that. Next category surprises me. Romance at 4.9% of my reading. I hate contemporary romance. Why did I read so many romance books? Oh my god, that hopefully tanks hard this year. I just really discovered that I don't like romance, like at all. Like, I don't want to read any more contemporary romance. I do have some on my like owned TBR for book boxes that I will be reading, but outside of that, I'm hoping to mostly avoid things that I know I'm not going to love. After romance was graphic novel. Well, 2 categories kind of tied for next, which was at 3.7%, both graphic novels and thrillers. Could I have added the thrillers to the horror? Possibly. I didn't, so sue me. I just got into graphic novels this year. I've never really read any before 2020, and I have found that I kind of actually enjoy like really dark graphic novels, which makes sense. So if you have recommendations for dark graphic novels, please leave them in the comments. I will probably be reading a whole lot of them this year. Thrillers are okay. Thrillers are kind of like one of those brainless reads where I'm not loving anything, but I don't hate them either, and I can read them really quickly. So it's like a good, enjoyable brain cleanse with a thriller. Next category was mystery at 2.6%. Could I have, again, added this to like the thriller horror category? Yes. Did I? Obviously not. I didn't read that many mysteries. There was only 7 of them. They're, again, like thrillers where I don't love them, but again, I don't hate them either. Next category was short story collection, where I read 3 short story collections. I actually love short story collections, and I'm kind of surprised I didn't read more. So that's something that I will probably be looking into more of for 2021, because like I said, I really like short story collections. Then one of each, I read one poetry book and one self-help book. I was so shocked to find out that I really loved that poetry book, and I will be reading more poetry in 2021 because of it. And the self-help book was one of my 1 stars of the year. Actually, I think that self-help book is going to show up as my worst book of the year. So I don't think you're going to be seeing any self-help in 2021. Some other, random stats that I tracked, the demographic that I was reading, was I reading adult books, young adult books, children's books, middle grade, whatever. I read overwhelmingly adult books. I'm 36 years old, I'm adult, I prefer adult books, I prefer like deeper stories, so yes, most of what I read was adult at 76.8%. YA was my second highest. I do enjoy a good YA story every once in a while. I have nothing against reading YA, it's just not the first thing that I go for, and that was 18%. For middle grade and children's, I read the same percentage for both categories, even though I recorded them as 2 different categories, which was 2.6%. I read 7 middle grade books and 7 children's books. I don't tend to like middle grader children. Like, just straight up honestly, it feels too young for me. The stories feel too simple for me. I've got something stuck to my lip and I can feel it when I talk, and it's annoying the shit out of me. Anyway, middle grade children's, not my thing. I may end up reading a handful of them for 2021, but it's not like a priority to read more middle grade or children's. The next category is like the ownership status, I guess, of the books that I read. If you have a better title for this category, please tell me, because I just can't think of like what to call this. Like, is it ownership? Is it where is this from? I don't know. Help me with the words. But this is basically, do I own it? Did I purchase it? Did I borrow it from the library or some other place? So overwhelmingly, I read books that I owned. Library would have probably been higher up if it wasn't closed from March to, I mean, it's still closed. Like, you still can't go to the library. You could like drive by pickup thing, but I don't have a car. So the only library books I get are digital copies, and my library has a much better like physical selection than it has a digital selection. So overwhelmingly owned books at 71.5%. 27% is from the library. Like I said, if the library manages to open, then that number will go up. If it stays closed for most of 2021, then it will stay lower. The other one I got, or the other category that I have in this section, is Kindle Unlimited books, which I read 4 of, so like 1.5% of my reading was from Kindle Unlimited. Format. What format did I read books in? Mostly, like over half were physical books, and it probably, again, would have been higher if the library was open, because I prefer, for the most part, to read books as physical books. There are exceptions, like the Stormlight Archive is a really good like exception. Those books are so thick. Like, it's a 1,200 page hardback book. It's heavy. It's awkward to read. I prefer to read those digitally, even though I own physical copies of them, because it's heavy. Anyway, physical books. 52.8% of my books were physical books. 38.2% of my books were ebooks. 5.6% of my books were audiobooks. I just don't concentrate on audiobooks very well, and I tend to get through a book a lot faster if I'm reading it like physically than I do listening to it. And then 3.4% of my books were mixed, where it's like maybe I'm reading part of it digitally and part of it physically, or part of it physically and part of it audio, but some sort of mix where I'm reading at least 2 different formats for the book. And the final stats category I have is the gender of the author. And I'm actually shocked about this one, because I was doing that Century Challenge and I expected overwhelmingly to be reading male authors, because until like the 1960s, like women weren't considered people. But apparently I really, really like women authors, because 51.7% of the books I read were by female authors. 44.2% were by male authors. 2.6% were by like multiple authors of multiple genders. If a book was by multiple authors but they were all like female authors, then it just went into the female author category. But if it was like by like a male-female duo, or like maybe a short story collection where it was like male and female, that went into multiple authors categories. And then 1.5% were by non-binary authors. Now, this is like subject to error. Maybe somebody that I thought was female is actually non-binary and I just didn't like see any identifying information in their profile, and that is completely my screw up. If I ever misgender somebody when I'm talking about them, please, please feel free to correct me. I do my best to like look into an author's gender and pronouns before talking about them, but I'm only human and I fuck up. That's how the world goes. I'm prone to errors. Also, if any of this math doesn't work out, I suck at math. That's why I read a lot. So just pretend like it makes sense. I did it mostly through Excel, so hopefully I entered the formulas correctly. And that is all of my reading stats for 2020. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Let me know if there are stats that I didn't track in 2020 that you think would be cool for me to track in 2021. Also down in the comments below, and I will catch you in the next video, which should be worst of the year, maybe? Best of the year, worst of the year, something like that. It's one of those two. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.